Hello. Hello. Hi, guys. Thank you for viewing today. Have you ever wondered what your chart of account is and what that actually means, and where each line item within your QuickBooks file, what it's doing and what statement it's going to? This video is going to help break down that information for you so that you can really understand where to put things, why it matters, and yeah, let's go. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Maybe. Okay. So we're going to, go over the chart of accounts. A lot of times it's COA, so if you see that, that's where it's at. We live in QuickBooks Online, so mostly we won't actually go into any screen shares for QuickBooks. So it is really generalized for the chart of accounts, and when whatever software you are using, this will help get you to a place in order to read what kind of story your numbers are telling you. Okay, so what is a chart of accounts? Well, it's basically this file cabinet in which you are putting all of your transactions into. Accounting is what's called a double entry system. And so every single transaction that you have has two different line items. And so when I say line items, this is what in your file everything is going to turn into. And so just an organization, because the raw data doesn't really tell us anything. So we create these line items, these chart of accounts, in order to make sense of it and really get us good data to tell us the story we want to see. This could go on forever for why you have your profit and loss, why you have your balance sheet, and where and why everything falls in line. But that's basically the nuts and bolts of it. It's just the very backbone of how things are viewed and looked at within your software. So every bank feed has a rule and line item, and everything gets categorized basically to your chart of accounts. Okay, so what are the basic accounts in which you're going to input things? So this is going to be your assets and liabilities. This is your balance sheet area. So think of cash, your current cash, current assets. Perhaps you have equipment and loans, your credit cards. Those are going to be your liabilities. And then you also have your owner's equity. This is also on the balance sheet. And this is going to represent money flowing in and out of what the owner has, or maybe their partners or shareholders or things like that. And it's also a giant bucket for what happens with your net income at the end of your year or fiscal year. Kind of throws it into this equity holding tank. And then a lot of your items, and where most people see everything, is going to be on that revenue expenses or profit and loss. And this is going to be on a different item, but it's going to show your sales, your cost of goods sold, your indirect, your direct expenses, payroll, all of the normal expenses that you tend to hear about in general. Okay. A lot of times you may see a numbering system within your file that can be helpful, and this is not a hard rule and you don't necessarily need to use these, but it's just a good idea as you line up things. A lot of times you can, sort things alphabetically, but it's a little bit easier when you have them numbered and you can kind of force that listing to be how you want to view it. So that's a lot of times where people tend to kind of dive into numbering systems. But in essence, if you don't have a ton, let's say most of your chart of account line items, maybe there's like 20 different ones on your profit and loss, and maybe like 8 or so on your balance sheet, maybe numbering isn't for you. Maybe that's just complicating it, but just kind of a overgeneral of what this might be. Your assets and liabilities classifications. So this is going to be your balance sheet area. And these you want to set up for your current assets. These are going to be your bank, your accounts receivable, any inventory. So current assets are things that are going to turn over within a year or are very quick to change. And yeah, liquid resources. So these are going to be your 1000s to 1499s. Your non-current assets, so this is going to be longer term items. So think about actual vehicles or machinery, your accumulated depreciation, this tax thing against these assets that you have. You can list these as 15 to 1900. And then on our liability side, still on our balance sheet, we're going to include things like if you have a credit card, or maybe you have a short-term loan, or sales tax that you owe. These are all going to be in your current liabilities. That's going to be your 2000 to 2499. And then your long-term liabilities, think of these like building mortgages, or maybe you have bank notes, or perhaps you have a funding from the previous owner if you purchased your business, and you have these long-term note payables that ultimately will just take longer than a year to pay off. We have that category as well. And then we have our equity side, and these are going to be our 3000s. We don't have a ton in these this area, as most of the time you're not really touching equity. Equity is more something that just is filtered in. But again, if you do have, if your owner tends to put money into the business more often, maybe you have some harder months, we'll put those as owner contributions and owner draws. And then another thing to highlight, glad it's on here, is our fundamental accounting balance. So this is all of our assets equal our liabilities plus equity, and that's just on our balance sheet. Okay, so then we're going to hop over to our profit and loss side. So when we are reading these, we want to see what kind of information is on here. The top line is going to be our operating income, and that's going to be in our 4000s. So this is going to be key things in your business that create revenue and why you're doing the job. Is this construction? Is this, and you can break these things down. We don't want to get in too much detail, but we do want to have enough detail where when we go back a year later, we know what it is. And now, when I say that, actually, on your income side, you typically don't have a giant breakdown because there are other reports in which you list your products and services, and you can run a report specifically for that. So when you're looking maybe on your profit and loss, maybe you just have one construction income and maybe discounts. And then when you go over and view a different area within your QuickBooks and reporting, you can pull what's your products and services. And this would look like window treatments, roofing, decking. And so you can very specifically see what products or services you offer are doing better or not. But in general, when we're looking at the profit and loss, a lot of times that's mumbo jumbo that we don't necessarily want. We just want that higher level on your profit and loss. And then we have our cost of goods sold. Again, we want some detail, but not a ton of detail. We're going to probably get this to be our direct labor and direct expenses for like cost of goods sold. So this could be your materials and supply. This could be rental equipment that you regularly are doing, or permits, or things like that that are very directly related to your operating income. And then you have your indirect area. This is going to be your generalized for your business, the 6000s. And this will, again, you want somewhat hierarchy, but not too much. We do have subcategories that you can create. So I like to see a lot of like administration and then advertising, so sales and marketing. And then maybe you have this category of like facilities, and that will incorporate your subcategory of like water and rent and repairs and maintenance. And then under payroll, make sure that it's not your direct item, but it will be your office managers or owner payments or your sales reps. Even though sales are pretty much directly, they're not exactly directly related to, they are directly related to your sales and getting the income, but you can create the product without that person. And so they are an indirect item and just a cost of your business. So we would do payroll and kind of have those, and again, your payroll taxes that are involved with those people and that sort of thing. We want to make sure that you're not doing like hyper specific, so don't do a vendor item as a line item. You're going to keep it very hierarchy of office supplies, not Office Depot and Staples and Fred Meyer, because there are a lot of other reports that we can pull in filtering and categorization that we can get from that. We just want to leave the profit and loss to all of our categories pretty generalized. And then one of the biggest things is to make tax time easier. It's going to be really nice, and to understand also the cadence of what is allowed and not allowed on your taxes. Is most companies are going to follow along what the IRS has for each line item. So dues and subscriptions, postage, payroll taxes, rent. There are specific line items within the IRS forms. You don't necessarily need to know that. That's why you have us to kind of help you along with that. Okay, so when you're looking at your chart of accounts, you want detail. You want to make sure that you're not just putting bank account, because maybe you have 3 different bank accounts. So you want to put, checking, maybe it's Chase that you have. So Chase checking and the last 4 digits of that account number, and then Chase savings and then the last 4 digits. And then maybe you have a different bank account for your high yield saving. So give some detail, but not a lot. And then parent and subcategories, they are great. Remember though, when you're categorizing things, and although you can set up a lot of rules within at least QuickBooks, you don't want too much detail, because remembering every single time, oh yeah, what did I do there? And just closing out your books, you want it to be a simple process. So if we have a list of 100 different line items that a transaction could go to, it just really complicates, and we don't actually get good information. We're just too much in the nitty-gritty, and we want to be able to look at whatever statement we're looking at and just gather information and move forward with that. And then it's also really helpful if you decide that moving forward you actually aren't using certain items, or you want to stop using them, inactivate them so that they're just not part of the list in which you are dropping down and seeing what is available. Okay, so in order to get you to where you want to go, we're going to enable those numbers if you would like to. That's a settings within QuickBooks. And then you're just going to review, make sure, go to your chart of accounts area and line by line see if your business actually is utilizing that account. And if you like it, great. If you don't, you can rename things, you can move them around and do all of that stuff. And then one feature I really love in QuickBooks is this setting the hierarchy, the parent area. You can actually lock the parent areas now. And so when you're looking at subcategories, you would only pull that. When you run statements and you use that parent company, it will say that parent company and then other and kind of like put it aligned, but visibly it's messy if you use that parent company. And then mapping all of your products. like I mentioned, your products and services, you want to make sure that everything is tagged correctly to the line items that you want to in order to pull the reports and how they should show up. You don't want your products and services to be touching your cost areas unless you are doing some fancy things within QuickBooks. You want to make sure that each line item is hitting appropriately in each area. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. I hope that you learned some information about your chart of accounts and that you can take this knowledge and review it yourself in your own file. And if you still have no idea what's going on, totally fine. We are here to help you. At All Accounting, we actually specialize in construction companies and trade-focused companies. So if that speaks to you and you need some help, please give us a phone call or an email, and we'd love to see how to help you. Also, if this was really helpful for you and you want to see more and hear more from me, hit subscribe on our channel. We would really appreciate it. All right, we hope to see you next time. Thanks.